Hi, this is Megan from Lofty View Farm. I just wanted to have a conversation with you guys about starting a farmer's market. Um, During the pandemic, I started a farmer's market with two other women that were vendors, that ended up being vendors. They sold, one of them was one of them raised pigs and sold teas. And then the other woman made homemade lotions and sprays, body sprays, and also she made homemade soap. And then myself, I had a certified organic veggie farm and certified organic chickens, and I would sell my chickens and my veggies. So we started the farmer's market with three very strong women, and we decided this, I believe, in mid-spring, and we decided to start it in June, which didn't give us very much time. I think it gave us like a month and a half. And I just wanted to talk to you guys about starting one. So maybe you would find this helpful and you're looking to start your own farmer's market in your town. The town that I decided to start our farmer's market in, I had been raised and I grew up in, and at the time I think I was 27. I'm 30 now. And we decided to start it just because we needed more of a community base in our town, and during the pandemic we weren't really able to see anyone, so we thought if we were able to make it COVID friendly, we would be able to see people, wear masks, and be outside and enjoy friends, family, neighbors, and just have a little bit more community. So my base of starting a farmer's market was, or the reason why I started a farmer's market was because of that specifically. And it may have been a little easier to start a farmer's market because our town had 48 farms in it. It is a pretty small town. I think there's like 3,000 to 4,000 residents there. We don't live there anymore, but my parents still have their big farm there. We started a 503c charity. It's for nonprofits, and that was a bit of a process. I will tell you the truth that I wasn't really a huge part of that. But that is what we did. The two other women actually handled that more than I did personally. But that is what we decided to do for our farmer's market, is make it a nonprofit and a not-for-profit. And one of the big things that I got out of starting a farmer's market, at least in New Hampshire, in the United States in New Hampshire, is that legally to have a farmer's market, you have to have 75% actually farmers' goods. So if you are raising your own sheep and making yarn and knitting items, that is considered you're a farm, and that is a farmer's market item. If you are raising your own meat and selling meat, that's a farmer's item, like you're a farm. And then if you are raising honeybees and selling your honey, that is a farm. Anything like that, raising your own veggies, these are all things that are considered like a farm item, and that you are considered a farm. Where we got into a little bit of a hard spot, because we love crafts. Everyone loves crafts. But when you go to a farmer's market, you're not going for like crafts. You're going to get like your food for the week. And legally you have to only have 25% of crafts that are allowed. So like pottery, because you don't usually like forage for your own clay on your property, you know what I mean? So pottery, which we love, house plants. We had a person that had house plants, but I'm not sure if that's considered a farm. I don't think that is, but it might be. The ladies that wanted to knit, having like hot sauce people that don't raise their own peppers. We had a lot. So anyways, I just wanted to try and give you a base. I don't know if I explained that correctly, but you have to have 75%, at least in New Hampshire, 75% of your vendors have to be farm or farm based, and then you can have 25% that's more of a craft. So and we have beautiful crafting people in our town. But anyways, I hope that was helpful for people that are starting a farmer's market. I think that's actually a good rule of thumb in general if you're going to have a farmer's market, because you can get really craft heavy And that was what was happening in the beginning of us starting the farmers market. It has now been going for 3 years, and it is a very successful market. I'm not a part of it. I was a president at one point, but I'm not a part of it anymore just because we moved 45 minutes away. But I still love seeing how it's been growing, and we made a point to have live music because we had beautiful musicians in town and we knew of people. And we also have, they have a food person every week, so it's really a really nice time. And I wanted to talk to you about like choosing like days and times. That was a big thing that we had to kind of funnel through. We had a lot of very established farmers markets in the area, so we couldn't pick the days that those farmers markets were on, and we actually ended up picking a Sunday, which does make it harder for people that go to church. And if you yourself go to church, it makes it a little more difficult. But we had been on one side of the spectrum where it was 12 to 3. We did a 3-hour farmers market. And then we went to the other side of the spectrum, which I think it was 10 to 1. And we found out the sweet spot was actually 11 to 2 for our farmers market in specific, because that was good for the food vendor. And then it also was great for people coming out of church that were local. And it was just a easier time to go out and about. Like you could do your trash run then, and we got a lot more like community people. So something to think about. But when you are doing this, I had to contact a lot of people, like if we were missing an item. So when you think of a farmer's market, you think of all the things you like to do. Like you like to go get meat, you like to go get veggies, you like to go get honey and drinks and baked goods. These are things, bread. These are things that you really are actually going to the farmer's market to acquire. So when you put yourself in the consumer's position, I had to contact a lot of different farmers and farms to see if they were interested in attending our farmers market. And the way that I found those people was either I knew about them or someone mentioned them, or I actually went into the other farmers markets profiles and looked at who they had for farmers. We had 3 big farmers markets in the area, and I was just trying to figure out like if there was a lamb person or if there was another bread person and stuff like that. And I would actually go ahead and contact these people and see if they were interested in joining. But you have to make sure the fee, depending on like how popular of an area you are, the fee to be a vendor isn't too high, because then it's going to discourage people from coming. I do believe it ended up being like $12 a time. We had our farmers market runs from the beginning of June to sometimes October. We kind of vote on that as like, we had a Facebook page for all of our vendors, and we would all vote on these things. We would bring it to the actual vendors to vote on. And we always see how late they can go into the season, because some people don't have veggies until that late, but they still might have meat. Something that worked out really well for us in general was we would hold random craft days or craft fairs throughout the season, and that allowed us to increase our vendors, and by like usually like 6 or so. And it would allow people that were local crafters that were really good at what they did, they were able to come in for a craft day, which was I thought that was ingenious, a very smart plan. And that didn't come from me specifically, but that was our way to help the locals sell their products, but even if they weren't specifically farming their own products. Another thing that we found is that we allowed drop-ins also, because some people are just seasonal. We have beautiful blueberries, a lovely wild blueberry season in New Hampshire. And one of the farms in New Hampshire, in our town, would drop in for like 3 or 4 sessions when they had like a whole bunch of blueberries to sell. And we would have fresh blueberries, and we would put that on our Facebook page that they were going to be there, and we would highlight. Facebook is actually has been a very big tool in that farmers market in general. Like when we started a Facebook page for the farmers market, and then also for the vendors, so that we could contact our vendors, and we would delete all the vendors every year and then add them for the next season, just to like have a clean slate, so people weren't still on the page if we didn't accept them again the next year. Other things that were super helpful. Oh, so advertising. We would advertise through Facebook, and we would highlight our vendors' pages, and we would ask them to write a little blog about themselves when we first added them as a vendor. And they would write a blog about themselves and send us photos of their products and themselves and whatnot, and we would actually post that on our Facebook page. We also printed up little signs. I don't know if it was off of Amazon, but they're just like the little like political type signs, and we would do those with like the farmers blah 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 farmers market and the time and the place. And we made it really big, because if you're driving, it needs to be like, they're normal, I think 2x3s, but you have to make sure that they're big enough letters that people can see it when you're driving by. And we would put those up all around the town. You just have to make sure that your ordinances are fine with having them up, or if you put them on private property, then you don't have to worry about that. The reason why our farmers market excelled so well, we were going to do it at our town hall, which is a place for the townspeople to vote and stuff like that, but we ended up going with a land that was privately owned. It was our town's library, but it was a privately owned library, and it's kind of in the center of our town across from our school. And the reason why we went with private property over going with property that was owned by the town is that we were allowed to have our food vendor there. Otherwise, they would have to. It's called a hawking fee in New Hampshire, at least. I don't know if it's throughout the U.S., but they would have to pay a hawking fee of $75 a day, which is very expensive if you were a food vendor. And so if you're on private property, it's considered catering. So they didn't have to pay for that, which was a huge blessing for them, because we had the people coming in for them to eat, and then they didn't have to pay for that, but they would have to pay for a vendor spot. And also, I think that because it was on, if it hadn't been on private property, we would have had to pay the town a fee every Sunday, having the farmers market on the property, unless they waived it, which you could have brought that to the town hall. But these are all things that were thought about and talked about with our committee. The different spots, the different titles that we had in our committee. So it started with 3 people. We actually ended up going to 5. 5 was a nice number, and a local farmers market, another local farmers market said 9 was like 7 or 9 was their sweet spot. But if you get too big, you have too many personalities involved, and if it's too small, it's not enough input for different sides. I had to make a point to have 50-50 for vendors, like actual vendors. So I was a vendor. Actually, all the people that started the farmers market were vendors, but we also wanted to have community members too, because they had a different side. And that was something that was pretty important when we were establishing our farmers market, is that the next year we ended up having more people that were community. And then it also allows people to be more helpful. Something that was pretty great that we did, and we stole this from another farmers market, have card readers. So what we ended up doing as a farmers market, we started a PayPal? We started a Square account for the farmers market that was attached to our bank. We started a bank account specifically for the farmers market that all of the vendor fees went into, so that we were able to use the money accordingly. But we ended up swiping, starting an account for a Square that was linked to that account, and we would be able to take people's cards. But we had a tent specifically for a welcoming tent, and people that were community members, or if we didn't have community members, we would set up a vendor table next to it, or it was a part of the vendor's table, one of the people on the farmers market board. And what we would do is the Square was set up to swipe, and it would go straight into the bank account that was linked or part of the farmers market. And it allowed vendors that didn't have a Square or weren't capable of taking cards, it allowed them to people were still able to spend money. So we had these coins that we would buy. I think we bought them off of Amazon. There were $1, $5, and $10 coins. And then we put like the blah 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 farmers market on the back of them, and then on one side, so it was double-sided. And we could sell in increments of, I think, $5 and $10 for people that wanted to just have coins to spend in the farmers market, which is a fabulous idea. Coins, and we would either write out a check or give them cash back from our bank. We had a little bank with some money in it, usually like $150 or $200 in it. And we also had checks for the farmers market. So at the end of the day, after we spent these coins, after people bought the coins and spent them throughout the vendors and throughout the farmers market, we would go around to the vendors and write them a check or give them cash back. And we would keep track of all of this stuff. But that was a very helpful way of getting our farmers market up and running, because not everyone, like my mom specifically, made soda and was a baker, and she didn't have a card reader, so she was able to still make money with these coins with people that just bring in debit cards, which is me. I always just bring in debit cards, right? And it just made it seamless, like super easy. So between just everything, it's just actually a really fabulous farmers market. And I hope that this has been a very helpful video. I'm trying to think of other things that would be helpful to mention. We had someone in charge of laying out the vendors and the vendor map. So we made like a little cheat sheet, and we would take a photo of it, like, or take a snapshot on your phone or whatever, and we would upload it every week, because sometimes the vendors changed a little bit depending on who we were adding. And the layout of our vendor map was, it was kind of like a square, and then it had room in the middle of it for like 4 or more tents if we needed, and then we would take the tents out if there was less people. But on average, oh, I totally forgot about this. So to make it a little more feasible for some people that were adding this farmers market onto their repertoire that did other farmers markets, we did half seasons. So we would do every other weekend throughout the whole season. So we would have like an A-B weekend, and it would alternate every weekend. I totally forgot about this. So those are the $75 vendors, and then it was $150 for the full season vendors. Sorry about that. It's been a few years. Anyways, so the half season vendors, we made sure it was an even amount. They would be they would be $75, and that was every other. The half season would be every other weekend. And then the full season got the full season, and I think it was $150 for our farmers market specifically. I know a lot of them, if you're like really well established, it can be more money. But all of that money would be pooled into the bank account, and we had a president, a secretary, and a vice president, and then we had board members. That's kind of how we did it. And a treasurer. We had a secretary. So we had a president, a secretary, a treasurer, and a vice president. And we made sure that we had at least monthly meetings throughout the year. And it was fun because we would go out to eat. That was kind of like what we did as a board. We would all pay for our own food. I know that if we were more established, probably the board members could get their food paid for by the farmers market, but we weren't that well established. But it made it very helpful. We would either do Zoom meetings or we would go out to eat, but out to eat was way more fun. That's kind of why you're a part of a farmers market board, is to hang out with fellow people that are like-minded. And when we had those meetings, we would hold them like actually like a legit meeting. Like the president would have an agenda, and we would go over all the items that were of issues or that needed to be talked about, or see if things were fixed that needed to be fixed, and delegate tasks to board members and stuff like that. And just, it was very helpful. I think that is really a helpful thing, is to actually have meetings. And then if you have to have them more often, like it seems like in the the end of winter, beginning of spring, you need to have a few more meetings, maybe twice a month or weekly for a little bit, until you're able to get everything figured out, because there's a lot of stuff to handle. It is a big undertaking as a board member, and you're doing it for free. So you either love your community or you are a vendor. So, and that is a very good reason why you should try and keep it 50-50 between community members and board members. Because otherwise it can be very vendor heavy and not like what is the overall picture that you want in a farmer's market. Yeah. So we had meetings, and the president would, which I was a president for a little bit, the president would have an agenda and we would go over it. The treasurer would say what they've spent money on or what checks have been taken out and do a lowdown of that and say how much is left in the bank account. And then the secretary would write down all of the minutes. So those are important roles if you want like a professional farmer's market. You also had to have someone in charge, is usually this treasurer, but someone was in charge for like doing your 503c every year, because you have to re-up that, and you have to do all of your tax information. Some accountants will do nonprofits for free, but some of them are kind of like my specific accountant didn't want to take any more on because she had enough of those for free. All in all, it was just an awesome farmer's market. I would start a new farmer's market easily in a heartbeat. The town that I'm in, they got rid of their farmer's market during, we live in a downtown, and they had a beautiful farmer's market because it's like half downtown, half really rural farms, and it is a college town. And they used to have a beautiful farmer's market, but now they have a market, which is easier for the farmers. I know that for a fact. But we also had that in the town I was from. We had a marketplace that people sold. It was like a hybrid farmer's market. They sold their items in. But we weren't trying to step on anyone's toes in that aspect. But those seemed to form during COVID. And the thing about a farmer's market is the reason why you have a farmer's market is to like see people in person, meet your farmers, talk about farming, learn from them, maybe learn about their animals that they care for and that they breed and sell, and what type of veggies are their favorites, see their passion behind what they are selling. And when you have a marketplace, you aren't able, like an in-person market that people bring their goods to and that there's someone selling their goods. That is not the same vibe as having a farmer's market. So I actually ran into that in the town that I'm from, that I grew up in, that I had to I felt like I was stepping on people's toes, which I was not trying to. But I wanted to have more of a community, like a gathering place. Like it's really a fun place to look forward to seeing friends and family and seeing your local farmers. And we really tried to keep everything really local. So everything's like within, I don't know how it is now, but when we were there was only like 2 or 3 towns over. Everything was very localized. And that's just really important. And so maybe sometime I might try and start a farmer's market in our town again, but I'm not really, I feel like I would step on people's toes like I did in my hometown, and I didn't want to make anyone upset. Anyways, I don't know if anyone else is struggling with that specifically, but I would start a farmer's market in a heartbeat. I mean, farmer's markets are so fun, and it makes you so into the community, and you get to meet all the farmers, and you get to see everyone, and see who's friends, and it's just a totally different vibe. I love farmers markets. And that is why we started one during COVID. But if you guys have any other questions, please feel free to comment below. I hope that this was helpful. Sorry it was kind of all over the place. I didn't really write down, my husband told me I should write down a list of like what I wanted to talk about, but I'm just kind of just talking to you guys like as a friend. And hopefully this was helpful for people that are trying to start farmers markets. That I wanted to mention was we paid our musicians every week. They were paid, I think we started out with $75 every time they came, and then I think we increased it later to like $100 or $125 depending on what they were. Some of them wanted to just donate their time, which was really nice. But our musicians were not free. That was actually part of our budget whenever we would put some of that money that we of from the vendors towards having a musician every week, and also budgeted how to all of the vendor money went towards either taxes or we made like bags and t-shirts to sell, or the musician. And then lastly, or actually this might be like the first thing, advertising for the farmers market. We would put it in newspapers, we would pay for Facebook ads, and we also had signage to promote the farmers market, because if you don't get your name out, then your farmers market won't excel. And another big point that we made is someone was in charge, or another big side of all of that is someone was in charge of the Facebook page, and we would actually share that we were having the farmers market to all of the local town community pages, and they all seemed really excited about it. It wasn't like a burden. We would just do it once a week, and we'd be like, these are the times and these are the vendors that are going to be there. We would list all the vendors and then who was playing and then what food was going to be there, and it would usually pull people in. We also did like live videos of like when the farmer market was like hopping. We would do live videos of everyone saying hi for the vendors, and we would go around, and then we would end like with the music playing, or begin with the music playing, and like look at the food and everything like that. It was really, the person that was in charge of the Facebook page did a really great job. So advertising is very important and is part of the budget, but I wanted to make sure that I mentioned that we paid for the musicians. They were not free, and it's because they were high quality musicians. Some of the things that like, it's kind of hard because you have friends and family in your community, or you know people and you want them to do well, but to actually like tailor a very nice farmers market, you have to pick and choose. We had this happen the second year that we started our farmers market. So the first year we kind of just accepted everyone that we could, but the second year we actually got all of our applications in by March and voted on people, and we only had, I think, 15 to 20 spaces, and we had to pick and choose who we wanted. So there was like, we always wanted like 3 veggie vendors, because veggies just go out. Like you can sell veggies nonstop. And then meats, we would always, a big part of the farmers market, and I actually was a little bit hard-headed about this, was that you need to protect your vendors. So you can't just have like 10 meat people, you know what I mean? Like there can't be like a whole bunch of, or not 10, but you can't have like 2 or 3 beef people, because then they won't be selling their products. You need to make sure there's only like one person that's selling beef, or they might do a little bit of pork, but mostly they're beef. And then you have like one pork vendor, you have like one chicken vendor, maybe 2 chicken vendors. Definitely the specialty items like lamb, 1 lamb person, 1 goat milk and goat cheese person. You shouldn't have multiple goat cheese people. 1 mushroom person, 1 honey person, 1 maple syrup person, maybe 2 maple syrup, but mostly just 1 honey maple syrup person, 1 bread person. If you have baked goods, have one that does like gluten-free baked goods, and then one that does like normal baked goods. But you have to be very protective of your vendors, because if you are just getting a whole bunch of, as I said, I think for our smaller farmers market, or our medium-sized farmers market, 3. I'm sorry if the video is a little different. My camera died. Anyways, I had to go get a new battery. So what I wanted to say is that you really need to protect your vendors. That is a huge thing that we found. Specifically, I think for our specific farmers market, we kind of got into a spot with soap, right? We had, and I was being protective of people that actually didn't feel like they needed to be protected at the time, which is fine. We ended up having 3 soap vendors, sometimes 4. But we had goat's milk soap. So they were goat's milk people. They raised their own goat. They made their own beautiful goat cheese. They also had goat's milk soap. So they were like a legit farm. They sometimes brought veggies and jams. And then there was also the person that started the farmers market with me that made her own items, and very different. These were all very different products. And then there was one other, she later became a vendor. I mean, she became a board member also, or her daughter did. And she had beautiful soap that she made that was homemade. And then sometimes we would have a drop-in vendor, every other weekend vendor that made her own soap. So we tried to make them every other weekend. Some of them were half seasons, so we tried to make them every other weekend, and they were fine with that. But you really have to protect your vendors and also make your farmers market as even as you can. So if you have a lot of half-season people, we had a lot of half-season people. I don't know if it's changed since then, but we said, hey, is it okay if we switch you to the other weekend because we have someone else that has maple products and you have maple products? Or we would do the soap people on opposite weekends and stuff like that. But you have to be very protective and you have to be choosy. So later on, when you have an established farmers market, you have to pick the best of the best. Like you vote with all of your people, like all of your board members, and you vote on who you're accepting and for what they're making, and whatever. We had them list what they wanted to bring on the form, and we had tech savvy people, so everything was online, which is fabulous. I'm not as tech savvy as they are, and I probably could figure it out if I needed to, but she had forms that were online. Sorry about the lawnmower, it just started up. Anyways, she was more tech savvy than I am in that regards. I probably could do that now, but in the form for the farmers market, we made it for January, and people applied from January to March, April, May. I think May is when we ended up voting on people. And then our farmers market started in June. We would accept the people that we knew we wanted right away, instantly, and then the people that were more crafty or we had duplicates, we would sometimes accept a little later. But people that we loved and enjoyed and we knew their products, we would accept right away, and then we would go from there. But it had what they were bringing, and we held them to what they were bringing. So, and if they were duplicating too much, we would be like, hey, you can bring everything on that list except for this blah 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 such an item, because we already have a vendor that specializes in that item and they do a really good job. We would have them send photos. If we didn't know their product, we would try some of their baked goods. If we didn't know their product, we were very picky, because you need to have an elite farmers market. You just don't want to accept items that aren't the best of the best. But when you're starting off, you can't be that choosy. That was our second year that we got a little more choosy, because our farmers market was the bomb, so people wanted to be a part of it. But we had the hardest time finding veggie vendors. I don't know if that's everywhere else, but specifically in our little town, veggie vendors were harder to acquire. So I sold out every single time I was there. I also made bread. So I did bread and then veggies and chicken. Those were the things that I specialized in. But yeah, anyways, I just wanted to say you need to be protective of your farmers and who's in your farmers market, and you can't just be accepting everyone, because that just doesn't make it fair to the people that are trying to sell their products. Other things I had of a list that I thought of while I was away. Let's see. Oh, parking. So when you are deciding on where you are starting your farmers market, you want to make sure that you have plenty of parking. Our parking spot was okay, but we have such a heavily traveled farmers market that it did get a little hectic sometimes, and then you have little kids running around. Our farmers market was put off to the side, so it was pretty contained and not like people on either side of the road. It was in a field, or on a big lawn that was a part of a field. And you need to think about all of these things when you're starting your own farmers market. Like, is it safe for little kids? Is it contained? Is the traffic okay? Because otherwise you have to pay for a police officer. And we also had to bring this all to the board before we even started the farmers market, to let them know that we were going to be holding an event in the town. I don't know if that's what other people need to do in their specific town or in their specific state or country. But that's what we had to do with our town, and we were friendly with all of our people in our town, so they were completely fine. We just talked to the selectmen and it was pushed through. But it had to be brought up. But they said that if it started getting hectic, because there was a main road that was near this farmers market, they said if it started getting to be people were parking across the road to walk to the farmers market, that we had to start getting a police officer. parking became a bit of like a topic, right? A farmer's market looks cleaner if the vehicles aren't parked around them, but for the farmer's market people, it is easier to have their vehicle with them, because then they're easier to set up. They don't have to move their vehicle when they're taking it down. I think that's a conversation that you have to have with your board. But half the time, I had little kids, so it was easier for them to like take a nap in the car if it wasn't hot and stuff like that, and we would just keep all the windows down. But anyways, it was easier for me to keep my vehicle near me, but it became a rule that our vehicles had to be parked across the road at the elementary school, which is fine. So these are all things that you have to think about when you're starting a farmer's market. So we had to make sure that our, it's kind of like if you have employees, right? All of the farmer's market vendors had to park across the road or in a different spot, so there was enough parking for the community members that were coming in to purchase items. I will tell you, because I've talked to different people on farmers market boards, it is very hot if you have your farmers market in a parking lot. Having it on grass makes it so much nicer. Just something to think about. Ours was on a lawn and it was so cool, and parking lots can get like really hot, especially if you're like in a more southern area than New Hampshire. We're very mild here. I think like in the beginning of the season it might be like 50 degrees and then it moves on. Talking about temperatures, another thing is like if we had a storm warning, we did not call it until the day before that we were either going to cancel the farmers market or whatnot. That was another thing that would always come up. We had drop-in vendors, so I think we started it out as like $10, and I think it went to like 15 or 20 to drop in as a vendor. Like if we did our craft fairs, our craft markets, we would have drop-in vendor fees, and they would have to fill out a form. Another part of the form is that we made sure everyone had insurance. So we, as a farmer's market, had insurance. That was an umbrella insurance, and we found someone to do insurance for our farmer's market. They have rules like you all have to have your tents secured and stuff like that. But everyone that was a vendor also had to have some form of insurance for their vendor or for their farm and for their items, you know what I mean? That was very important for us, and we would have to have verification of that. So when they started as a vendor, we would have to have their application. We would have to have, by the time they came in, we would have to have their insurance and then their fee. So these are all things that we would acquire. I'm trying to think if there was anything else. I had a few items that I wrote down. Oh, our farmers market Facebook page for the group was a private group, and you can set that up as a private group. So as a private group, and yeah, I wanted to just mention that because I don't know if I said that. So you had to be invited in, and the admins were the people that were actually the admins of the farmers market. And so we could either add vendor maps, is what we would call them. So we would make a vendor map every week, and we would try and keep the actual like farmer. We wouldn't switch people around. We wanted to keep them there where they were for the whole season. It was helpful for us because we had like two ways of coming into the farmers market, but we tried to bring the people in, so we'd have like the veggies further out and stuff like that, and try and make everything kind of mixed and mingled. And the vendor map always was changing because we had every other weekend people. So the people that were year-round for the whole season, we would have those people like in a permanent location, like on corners usually, and then we would fill in the sides in the middle of the farmers market every week depending on who was coming in. Another thing I was going to mention, what we had for vendors for our specific farmers market. We had a flour vendor, we had a bread vendor, we had a bakery, we had a pork vendor, we had a beef vendor, we had chicken, we had 3 veggie vendors, which veggies are the most important. Like you honestly could not go wrong with having probably 5 veggie people because everyone's there for veggies. We had a jam person, we had soap people, we had a honey person, we had a hot sauce person, we had a maple syrup person. I'm trying to think. Seasonal people, we had strawberries. There was a gentleman with his family that would bring strawberries in, and they would make strawberry smoothies. We would have, we had a fish person for a little bit. I wish we could have kept our fish person because that was absolutely fabulous, but it wasn't enough. They're used to high volume of people, and they did such a fabulous job. But we had a fish person at some point. We had the blueberry people. I mean, we just had a really well-rounded farmer's market, stuff that was more crafty. We had a houseplant person that raised all their own houseplants and did a great job. We had pottery. We had woodworking, so they made their own like woodworking stuff. We had a photographer. We had some knitting, so stuff like that. And then if someone wanted to do like a not-for-profit for like their church, we would let them just come in for free because they were trying to raise money for their church and stuff like that. But I'm hoping that all of this information was really helpful for you guys. Just stuff that I know would have helped me if I was starting a new farmer's market. And I know that this whole conversation's kind of been all over the place, but I hope that it's just a wholesome, well-rounded conversation for people that are trying to start a farmer's market. And if you guys have any questions, please feel free to comment below. Please subscribe if you like this content, like my video. All these things help me. And I appreciate you guys watching me, and I look forward to seeing you again. Thank you so much. Bye.